scale up the business, work with manufacturers directly, what advice would you have?
You need to win for why you're different to every other seller. If you want to work with the big boys, you play by their rule.
Give us a little bit of background. Tell us about where the business is right now.
So where we're at now, 9-figure business, multiple European markets. Hopefully we'll start selling in the US in the next 6 weeks. Currently in Spain, Italy, France, Germany, Poland, and obviously the UK.
Amazon does represent one of the sales channels that you have, but you have multiple other channels, is that
correct? Right? We sell on other marketplaces.
Okay.
So for instance, Cdiscount in France.
Okay.
It's quite a big market.
Yeah.
Obviously everyone's aware of eBay, and you have Allegro in Poland, and so on and so on.
And are you selling off marketplaces as well?
We do, for the manufacturers, supply on a D2C basis.
Yep.
And the on-demand trend. Okay. So we'll supply them directly to their warehouses, and then they'll do the deliveries within 15, 20, 30 minutes.
And if I understand, if you're happy to answer, Amazon does represent probably like 9 figures of revenue, and obviously you have more than that in all the other areas. Would that be correct?
Yeah.
Fantastic, cool. And obviously you're looking to expand into the US, and we can touch upon that later. So
sure.
Obviously exciting. My business is buying from distributors, wholesalers, and reselling. Do you work directly with manufacturers? What does that look like?
We only really work with manufacturers. We do some wholesale, but that's not our strategy. Our strategy is just to work with our partners, with our manufacturers, with a one business mentality.
Now, there was something, obviously, we spoke over the weekend just gone, where you said as part of the growth strategy, you only really work with manufacturers who do 350 million as a minimum.
Our smallest manufacturer we work with, revenue is 350 million.
Wow.
And some of our largest, well, they're billions. FTSE 100 companies.
Talk me through the journey. How long have you been in business? Tell me about that.
Business since I was around 18. Many failures along the way. Started e-commerce, selling on eBay. Wasn't really Amazon around. PayPal wasn't even alive as such. There was a thing called Bill Point and no checks for the old sellers. They'll remember that. And then buying from wholesalers. We was doing retail arbitrage without realising what retail arbitrage was. An example was my wife was pregnant. We was buying the 3-for-2s from the supermarkets and then selling them on eBay. And then we just transitioned as time went on to selling onto Amazon and then other marketplaces within the blink of an eye where we are today.
And that journey, how did you get into, before you started, what this is we're in right now?
Well, there was none of this YouTube and courses and selling. I think it was just a case of seeing opportunities. No one really had a .co.uk website as such. So we built some small HTML-based websites, didn't really sell anything because we didn't know how to. It was more of a destination point of this is who we are, hello. Then eBay, we was buying and just reselling on eBay from stores, from wholesalers, but it was more distributors then. So where a brand would sell to a distributor and then the distributor would just sell to anybody effectively. Yep. And then we started importing from China, but back in the day it was a container. You couldn't order a box full of products like you can now, and it was delivered in 3 or 4 days. And then that didn't work because costs was just too high. Cash flow was a huge issue. And it's hard to try and build a business and run a business whilst also needing a salary from the business. And this is something I've always said to the guys that send me messages and inboxes, how should I get started? Well, you should run it in parallel with your employment. 24 hours in a day. There's before work, there's after work. And then we fast forward to working with larger companies than myself at the time.
And is this before 2011 or after?
So yeah, before 2011, I was in partnership working with some big buyers of excess stock, probably the largest in Europe. We kind of formed a friendship and a bond, and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them guys supporting me and backing me, and we worked together. I remember having a call with this particular chap, a guy called Christoph, and said, kind of need to do this by myself. I think he actually recommended it because I was in partnership with somebody else at the time, and it went from there. We did that for a few years, and then they really helped me get the business to where we are. They're one of our major shareholders.
You mentioned they're supporting you, helping you. What does that mean?
They had my back.
Define that.
Yeah, they would there. It gave me the confidence to be able to go and buy stock in bulk. They kind of underwrote it if it was required. If the stock didn't sell through fast enough. Yep. I didn't have that kind of revenue and access to cash. This was without using a bank. And then we started together to build this infrastructure and the partners that we've got, how can we get them into multiple locations? And we then started building a team, but advice as well. Guys that had worked with them for something like 17 years. It's about advice. Somebody's always got more advice than what you have, and you need to be able to listen to the advice and take the advice. Sometimes it was a little frustrating. We would have conversations on whether we should buy a deal or not, and then we would buy the stock, and then sometimes everyone would be against buying the stock, and then I would be like, but I really want to buy it, and then Chris would say, well, then just buy it. But then the belief and the trust is what I had from them.
In my journey of interviewing people and also talking to people in my journey myself, that's something which I keep hearing, but no one ever talks about. No one ever talks about, like, how do you develop those relationships? How do you have someone that can help you out and tell you when to buy or not to buy, and probably be quite honest with you, call your own BS, like when you're lying to yourself, which we all do in business sometimes. We protect our ego. Can you explain more around that and like how you form that relationship and people can learn from it?
Yeah, I think we pitch as well on trust, integrity and honesty, and that's something I learned from these guys. And the European guys are really good at being direct. Sometimes like, yeah, whatever, but then no means no, or yes, that's a good idea, but actually calling out if it's a bad idea. But also, I guess it's all cliche of letting you make your own mistakes as well, and very good at that. And we pass it down as well to our team. Obviously, there's been frustrations and ups and downs, but learn from those above and try to just do better every day.
What are some specific tactics or tips that maybe you, on reflection of that time, that you did or you could have done that people can take away to build those types of relationships? So I think they're key. So again, I think you've got to be honest. Yep.
Trust is everything. And not look at everyone as a competitor. I think when you're young, that's what you do. You look at somebody else who's doing what you're doing. They're a competitor. You can actually work together on lots of things. Maintain good integrity. I think you also need to ensure that you remain profitable along the way and work hard and not dismiss everything, no matter how big or small. Find a niche. You probably won't realise what your niche is to start with. It could just be a case of, I need to get big, or actually my plan is to consolidate this year. But if you write yourself a list of 5 principles, whatever you believe in, and have the target in mind, but just not at any cost. So for instance, I'd like to achieve X amount of revenue by doing this, this and this, because then that will free up this kind of margin or percentage profit to enable me to do these other things. But know what your plan is. I think it's a key thing, and understand the reasons why, and treat every person that works with you as part of the company. Treat the company as a company, and you're just an employee in the company. It's not your money, it's the company's money. Pay yourself a salary, but that's it. Same for everybody else. Bonuses and everything else is a different conversation, but you have to act like the bigger company that you want to be.
You mentioned something there, the word niche. What does that, like, I've talked about that. It's something that I've learned, say, to my own detriment, of not niching down. What does it mean to you?
I guess it depends on everybody. So get niche, get big, or get gone is something I think about. Your niche could be, I'm only going to work with FTSE 100 companies, or I'm only going to work in a specific category, or I'm only going to work in, say, nutrition, or I'm only going to work in fashion. Or my niche is, we are easy to work with. People often forget them other things. They just think about a product type or a specialism. What are you doing differently that everybody else isn't doing?
I think Warren Buffett talked about it. He said, make a list of 25 things that you really want to achieve, draw a line under 5, obviously make sure they're ordered, draw a line under 5. The top 5 are the ones you should focus on, and the next 20 are the ones you should proactively avoid because they're distractions. When you think about niching, it's like defining what you're going to do, but also what you're not going to do. And I think that's the important part, because we get so caught up.
I think the other key thing is you sometimes need to go outside of your niche as well if there's an opportunity, because that could be your next niche, or it could be a business within the business. I know that some of the guys on my global team struggle with that, because they're probably more focused than what I am. And they're probably better than me in certain areas. And that's why we've built a team, we've handpicked a team, and we've got guys that have joined us. That's took us 3 years to persuade them to come and join us. Yeah. And then now that they're here, they're probably, why didn't we do this sooner? And I can be a bit, I'll just do things and come out of my own process sometimes. Process is massive and everyone should stick to it. But sometimes you need to be entrepreneurial. Liaise with a couple of people. I'm just going to do this. I know I've not done this, and get stuff done and then figure it out. And some people struggle with that as well.
Before 2011, you were doing your thing, and it sounds like you had work as well before you created this company. Tell me about that journey from where you were then to creating this company and that decision process. Like, how did you say, right, we're now going to form what we are in today?
So I was still working with one of our major shareholders, which was good because I had a guaranteed salary. And then we started looking for units and office space and so forth. And we had this boardroom's nice, but the office was half the size, with stock on the table, UPS drivers pulling up, no forklifts, nothing. And because you have to keep your costs down, you have to do everything. Having water delivered, it's a cost. This didn't exist. And then we spoke to some manufacturers and said, this is what we're doing in Germany. We'd like to do it in the UK. And it's not as easy as you think, because often in these big organisations, they're different teams with different P&Ls, different directors. But we managed to speak to one of the guys and they said, sure, we'll give you a trial. Because what they don't want to do is they don't want to stop supplying their existing partner because the revenue would drop. So sometimes you have to be in the right place at the right time. There's a reason they engaged with us, because I guess things wasn't going well. And then after a short space of time, if you're increasing their revenue, then they're all in. And they're in big. Then if you do a good job, bearing in mind these big FTSE companies, they're global, then obviously their other countries start to be, oh, hang on a minute, there's an opportunity for growth there. Then you start engaging with them. And one of our principles is what we do in the UK, if we can do the same partners in all of the other countries, then the business is just going to grow massively anyway. But also a lot of manufacturers have lots of brands and different niches. So it might be nutrition, might be health, might be pharmaceutical. You do a good job in nutrition, then the health team's going to get in touch. So then that's actually 3 business units within one manufacturer working for you in one country that you can then take into other countries. And it's just that doubling effect. Then what we've noticed is an employee will leave and go and work for another large organisation. And the first thing they do, hopefully, is contact you, because they know that you've done a good job at the previous company. It takes a lot of pain away from them. And that's how we've built the business. Trust, integrity, honesty. We've got an open book policy, 100% transparent. And we work together as if we're one business. And we've even had guys contact us through the manufacturers where they know each other, they've networked. Network's a key thing to this. And before you know it, you have them dialing in. Just, can we chat? Can we have a meeting? But it sometimes takes a year to start because of their red tape and politics. And that's another thing. Make yourself easy to work with. Don't have the politics and the red tape. Don't say yes to everything, but try and say no, because you're there to help them and facilitate them. And then effectively you become their retail arm in one sector, and it just helps them. Because believe it or not, the FTSE 100 companies, not all of them fully understand selling on Amazon or any other marketplace, because it's more expensive to do that because of shipping and fees. And old school finance directors would rather just send a lorry full of products to Tesco's.
I'm assuming you've talked about the business model there of the current business and how it's where you're approaching, but I just want to check with you. Was that the vision of the business when you started it, to work with these larger manufacturers which had multiple countries that they were selling in, and then to secure one and then look to scale up that way? And what I'm trying to understand really is, what was the initial vision and how has the vision evolved since 2011 to where we are today?
Initial vision would be, I would just buy from anybody. As long as I had products and stock, I didn't really care.
Yeah.
So I didn't have the niche then.
Yeah.
Didn't really have the vision. The vision was buy as much as I can, get as big as I can, and be as profitable as I can, and take people on the journey and have fun.
Okay.
And then it's easy to buy a branded product from a manufacturer than it is a private label product and try and get that brand to market, because a lot of brands automatically sell themselves. And from a search point of view, we've seen SKUs that are selling just because people are searching for them. Because I can't remember what the statistic was, but more search is done on Amazon than on Google. Unless you're saying, I'm looking for a vintage pair of something, then you'd go onto Google, or when was the end of a conflict? So that's what everyone needs to remember, is search starts on Amazon.
Coming back, you started the business off, we want to buy, we want to sell these products, make money, fantastic. And then you've transitioned into this business, which is probably quite strategic. You know exactly who you're targeting, the company size, what you're looking for of them, how you're going to get in them. It's a long-term game network. How did you do that evolution? Like, why did you change? Because there are people today still buying from wholesale distributors making money. Like, why did you make that transition into this?
Ease.
Okay.
Professionalism. It's much easier to buy directly from it's not easy to buy directly from a manufacturer, but if you can, you're buying a product at source and cheaper than from a wholesaler.
Yeah.
But you're working together to grow that brand, that product, and that category. And I think when you're buying deal stock or you're buying from wholesalers, which I've done for 20 years, it's hand to mouth all the time. You can't build a revenue stream. You can't build a run rate. But most importantly, you've not got a business to sell. You can't sell that business to a manufacturer. I don't mean physically sell it. What I mean is what you pitching to them. I just buy products from where, at what price, what's the strategic reason. And that's why I think we're appealing to the manufacturers.
So you talked about coming into buying into the manufacturers. What does that journey look like? How do you have the conversations? How are you approaching them?
It's difficult. So I think initially you need to have the facilities and the systems in place, which is a bit of a gamble.
What does that mean? Define that.
So you need a warehouse.
Okay.
You can't be working from home. Manufacturers want to come and see you. You also need a good balance sheet because they want to ensure that you're going to be around in business. They're going to spend all this time and effort and money. Do you have the infrastructure? Can you actually grow with the facility that you've got? Can you actually do what you're saying you're going to do? Are you open? Are you transparent? Because there's a lot bigger companies out there than our company, especially in the early days. And they need to take a leap of faith as well. So you need to get on really well. So relationships and networking is key to these people. But it's unfortunate that the larger manufacturers, without this in place, they wouldn't even answer your calls.
And you talked about, so profitable business, because obviously you need longevity and you need to show that you're a good operator. You talked about ease of working. Define that. Like, you talked about it now, you're transparent, you're easy to work. Like, how? How do you show that? How do you demonstrate it?
Agility. Manufacturers are quite demanding and want to try things. Internally, they can't do what we do, else they would do it. Examples could be, we want to launch this product, we only want to trial a few units, we want to do this, this and this. Can we do it? How long would that take? And it's actually unbelievable that they used to not believe how quick we could execute something. We even used to lie a little and say, it's going to take 4 days, when we know it's going to take us half an hour. Internally, it would take them months and months of sign-off and red tape and everything that goes with it. So I think be flexible. And then eventually they understand and they realise. And it's in their interest for you to succeed, because if you succeed, then they succeed. Because at the end of the day, all the manufacturers are interested in is growing their revenue, protecting their brands, enhancing the brands, and giving the customer the best solution and the best offering in the fastest way possible.
You talked about building relationships with manufacturers, and it's a long-term game. And I think we know this from trying to speak to manufacturers and having the conversations. It's exactly what I expect. How did you deal with that? Like, how did you build the long-term relationships? How did you get in there?
Luckily, a manufacturer approached us in one of our other countries. This is where sometimes a bit of luck comes into it. But with our major shareholder, they had a successful business for a long time. So they had the operations and the warehousing, and we made a successful business working with manufacturers from a deal stock and an excess stock point of view. Over the time, there was people that we built relationships with. And then this one particular manufacturer, we was working with them in Germany, and it was a case of, we should do this in the UK. Arranging that meeting, you would think would be straightforward, but it's not, because each of these countries are run individually, and then everyone's got to run P&Ls, as we mentioned earlier. But we gave them some examples of what we've done, how we've done it in that market, and can we just try for you in the UK? And of course, we managed to persuade them. So we must have been able to present correctly or answered what they was looking for without them asking the questions is always a key thing, is understand what they need, because all manufacturers need the same thing. And then obviously, as we mentioned, we did the trial, it went successful. But even now, when we approach other manufacturers that have not heard of us or that are not connected in our network or they've worked in previous companies, it's hard still because they're in their own bubble, or it's working fine, or it's working okay, or change might be difficult, and you just have to break them down. Consistency, keep trying with them. But also, if it's hard work, it might be hard work when you're working with them. So there might not be a partner for you. So that then brings you back to the niche side of things as well. So sometimes we decide on the partner we want to work with now as well, because we're at a good enough size that we can do that. So culturally, they need to fit with us as well. And we've noticed that more and more with the manufacturers, we have to fit with them. It's not just a case of who can buy the most, who can sell the most, because the manufacturers are in it for a long term. And that's good for our business because we know how hard it is. Unless you're a terrible partner, the manufacturer should be with you for life.
You mentioned all manufacturers want the same thing. Can you be specific about that?
They want growth, want professionalism. They want to ensure that their products are stored correctly, that the products get to their customers in the right manner, and that you look after the brand as if it was your brand. And that's when they then trust you with brand registry and so forth.
You talked earlier on about working with manufacturers is a risk. You've got to kind of invest, be ready. It's not going to be we'll ship you a couple of boxes. It's back to the China, the container, multiple containers maybe. Tell me about that. Like, what do you mean by risk? What do you mean by investment? Being ready to deal with them.
So obviously when you start to have a manufacturer, big orders, and cash flow can always be a problem no matter how big your business is. Mm-hmm. So we didn't have any borrowing, but luckily my colleagues with their previous business was there as a backup just in case. And the more you grow, the bigger the cash flow is required. So if you can't buy that product and sell that product before it's due, then there's a problem straight away. Mm-hmm. Or a lot of manufacturers like you to hold 6, 8, 12 weeks worth of stock, which is good because it ensures revenue stream and you're not out of stock. So a lot of businesses lose 30% revenue just because they're out of stock, either because they don't have the cash to buy the stock or they're overstocked in a product that's not relevant. But it's also in the manufacturer's interest for you to sell the product through so that you buy more of the product. So the risk was that we could buy a lot of products and not sell it through as fast enough, but we did because the payment terms with manufacturers is not. They'll pay you on 90 days, but they'll want you to pay on 30 days, of course they do. They're in control. I say if you want to work with the big boys, you play by their rules. Mm-hmm. What we had to do was keep our overheads low strategically for quite some time and build up some good cash reserves so that we then had the confidence to go into the manufacturer, being able to place the orders if they was willing to work with us. And even now, we have to be selective on our growth. If we was to onboard 10 new partners, could we manage from an account management and a personnel point of view? Could we manage from a cash point of view? Could we manage from a warehouse point of view, from a storage point of view? So that's why you need the niche, the plan, the vision, and the timeline of when these things are going to happen. And then you still have to take a risk and obtain a larger warehouse in anticipation of more partners coming on board. And that could be a big risk.
There's a lot there, and I'd love to go into more detail about this. Can you talk about, let's say, for example, your journey? When did so 2011, you started the business. How long was it before you had, should we say, your first manufacturer and you did take that risk and we signed them, should we say? And how long were you building up the cash flow? How long were you, should we say, the warehouse? And how do you manage that? Even like cash flow, that's a big issue that people, we've got to deal with. And when we think about scaling, it's like managing cash flow, profitability, get more debt. You were like debt free and had cash and the warehouse operation to get these manufacturers. Give me more detail about that.
So I think when we first started the business, the official company name and so forth, obviously we've had name changes since, it wasn't a proper business. It was more of a trying it, buying, making a salary. Mm-hmm. So realistically, it's only been around 5 years since we started with big manufacturers.
Wow.
People always ask when did the business start because they like to fact check and they like to check the date the business was registered and so forth. But realistically, it's been the last 5 years.
Okay.
But managing it at the start, you have to manage everything from unloading lorries to doing accounting and so forth. And then you start to outsource some parts of these things, which is better than nothing because you just can't split your time. And then before you even blink, you have an accounts team, you're building a global team, you've got C-suite members, you've got account managers. That then brings its own problems. Who's managing the staff? Who's actually in charge? And that's something that we've only really figured in the last 18 months to 2 years. I call it staying in your lane. So if you're the warehouse manager, you're the warehouse manager. If you're the global sales director, you're the global sales director, and so on. So before you know it, and I was warned by Chris that this would happen, is you don't lose control, but you're not the small, close-knit family you was. You end up having sections within the company, and it's how you can maintain that. And that's something we do quite well at. But yeah, the finance team, they log into the bank daily, they make the payments, and you just have to have trust in the teams and employ the right people. Same with the sales team, same with the account managers. Our account managers have their own manufacturer that they work with. If the manufacturer's large enough, then probably their own brand within the manufacturer. And then obviously your operation guy looks after all of that side of things. And it takes time and experience to not interfere, even though this is your baby. And it's hard because you know every single aspect of the business, every nut and bolt, because you've built it from packing the orders to ordering the packaging to stationery, everything, cleaning the windows, because that's why we're here today, by keeping the money side of things on track. Then it becomes easier once you've got the team, because then you have a proper business that's running like a big operation. And then it comes a bit harder because then you've got bigger personalities to manage, and then they manage their guys, and people have different opinions. But so long as everybody's got the vision and they're on the same wavelength and we all fit together culturally, then it becomes even more enjoyable than it was at the start. As long as everybody's on the same mission and plan. You're going to have some personalities where it just doesn't work. But in general, we like the idea that everyone's here forever. Or can we grow them as individuals? They might move on to better things. We'll help them with that, because there is life outside of your own organisation. But it's a different game when you get to a certain revenue. And then there's tax implications, dealing with banks and so forth. But your finance team deals with that because that's their bubble. And then it all comes together.
I could probably be here for days talking about team and building, but I'd like to come back to cash flow and profits.
Sure.
One of the common mantras which I hear is, as you grow, your margin declines.
100%.
And I think, but there's an element of whereby maintaining margin or trying to maintain profitability, especially when we get to your level where you're talking about teams, accounts teams, not an accounts person, but a team, and obviously 9 figures, and you're dealing with manufacturers directly. What have you learned on that journey about margin, maintaining it, profitability while scaling warehouses and trying to get cash in the bank as well?
There's different business models, and everyone has their own opinion online. To go forward, you have to go backwards. And that's not necessarily just getting a bigger warehouse. It's investment in key people that will help you grow the business. And the salaries are large, but without that, you can't get the future size and profit. So for instance, our profit halved once we started the next phase of recruiting. And this isn't recruiting people from an operational orders point of view. This was building a global team. So investing in people. So you have to go backwards to go forwards. Margin could potentially half, but I still believe you should make a margin. You should still make a margin after these costs, at least break even. You do hear of companies where they burn cash to speed for scale, but I think you should grow a sustainable, profitable business. Look at your timeline. When would this key guy start? When would a new finance director start? When would a COO start? When does your CTO start? Then he's going to need cash because he's going to need to build a team. Then he's going to need multi-7 figures money to build technology and systems to go to the next level. And then that's on the timeline, is that then do we go for funding? Then do we need to go to the bank? Or do we just need to be a bit impatient? At the moment, now we're going for a big growth phase, still remaining profitable. And then there comes a point where you might need investment. But fortunately for us, one of our manufacturers approached us and asked if we'd be willing to sell equity in the business. So this is a FTSE 100 company who normally buys brands, wanting to buy equity in our company. And that's a good reference. And from a profitability point of view, we didn't need to, because we had a good war chest, shareholders' funds was good. But strategically, one of the reasons for doing it, in my opinion, was they're a great partner, love working with them. They're not only helping us grow our business from us buying products directly from us, but introductions into other manufacturers and partners as well. which you would think, why would they do that? But it shows the one business mentality. But then by accepting their investment, which was multi-millions, ensured or gave us a greater chance of securing them as a partner and their revenue in all the markets that we play in. And then we then formed so then we accepted the investment. So then that enabled us to grow faster, bigger premises, more people. That helps the cash flow.
2 years ago when we met, I came here and you were in the middle of signing that, which was like mind-blowing. And I wasn't allowed to talk about it at all, and also didn't mention anything, but thank you very much for, should we say, highlighting that. And I share this because in my vision of a business which works with manufacturers, it's, reselling products, working with brands exclusively, and that was like my vision of the pinnacle. And then when you introduce the idea of the company buying into you, now basically you've said, now the company wouldn't take away the exclusive because they're taking money away from themselves, which is I was like, wow, I didn't even think about that next level of that.
Well, I think if there was so these manufacturers have their own investing arm within the manufacturer.
Yeah.
And I say this to my guys all the time. If the manufacturer had a better solution, regardless of the investment into us, they would use it. So that's why we always have to be at the top of our game, best in class, and win. And I just want to win.
Yeah.
I just want to be the best and do a good job.
From the manufacturer's perspective, what is the advantage to them investing in you, and why did they do that?
I ask that question all the time, and the question could be, why don't you do it yourself? And we then found out that they tried to do it themselves. Maybe for political reasons or red tape or agility. It was just, they're experts in what they do, building brands, marketing brands, and we're better at logistics and running marketplaces. And that's a key thing, is know what your position is within in the partnership. They do this, we do that. And then we have workshops and think of new ideas and better ways of working. So I think that the main reason was because we was best in class. And that was always one of the 5 things that we aim for. Be the best in class, be the fastest, be the easiest to work with, and so on.
I'd like to just delve down more into that. So this manufacturer has now invested into your company.
Yeah.
Does this cause conflict of interest with other manufacturers?
It doesn't. And we were surprised by that because they're going to use somebody else anyway, the other manufacturers. And if anything, it helps their business because it gives us bigger volumes and bigger cash flow. And it benefits everybody in the ecosystem. But you just have to have a thing like Chinese walls where you're not talking about each other's businesses. So our account managers work for that manufacturer and so on. And they're in their business within the business. Some manufacturers, old school manufacturers, might have an issue, but forward-thinking big manufacturers don't. That comes back to the trust part of thing.
When I was here 2 years ago, you were telling me how manufacturers will send their people to you to come work here for a couple of weeks to learn about what you do, which is real integration between, should we say, logistics and obviously the manufacturer, which is brilliant. I never even understood that that was an option on the table until you told me about it. Where does it go from here? What are the opportunities that now come from this now that you've seen that?
So I think, it depends on the strategy. Our strategy is to onboard more partners sustainably, but sometimes we have to be patient ourselves because we wouldn't want to take on a manufacturer and let the other manufacturers not get the best service. So we need to make sure that we've got the right people at the right time and more people, and then they're ready for these new manufacturers coming on board. So I think for us, the next move would be to move into other marketplaces, other markets as well. We don't work in the US yet. We're ready to go. We'll be launching soon. And then handpick the best manufacturers that work with our culture and ethos.
For me, it would be big list of manufacturers, call them up, see what we can get. But obviously, you're a bit more strategic. You know what you're looking for. What does that process look like when you're looking for a manufacturer, qualifying them? You said it's got to work for us and them. What does that look like?
So you should have a criteria list, and it could be as simple as the niche. The niche could be type of product, size of company, ease of working. From that, our niche, with them, and where they're going. Are they growing? Are they open to trying new things? Is their culture good? Is it just a hard sales, buy as much as you can and no consequences? Do they want to execute the same way we want to? And because we've got such a good benchmark of our existing manufacturers, we use that as the standard now. Okay. So we often find, we know within 3 months whether a new manufacturer is a good manufacturer or not a good manufacturer. So rather than think, I want to work with this manufacturer because they sell these products, they could actually not be a good manufacturer for you.
And what does it look like? I'm guessing you would probably end the relationship or try and resolve it, if not then end. Of course. What does that look like?
I mean, we've been quite lucky that all the manufacturers like what we do and want to work with us. You wouldn't just not work with a manufacturer if it wasn't working for you and it was working for them. You'd try and resolve it. Mm-hmm. You'd work together, or you'd help them find another partner, because it's a small world. We're about building relationships, and they might not be right for you now, but later on. Mm-hmm. But one thing you have to remember is all of these people move on over time and go and work for another manufacturer. And you have to bear that in mind. And that's one of my key things, is your relationship has to be with the individuals, not the manufacturer, because it's the individuals that drive the business with your individuals within your business.
You had the gentleman at the beginning who helped you out, guided you, or the group that gave you support and community. You talk a lot about relationships. You talk about risk, and even to this day, do you still have people guiding you, supporting you externally, even mentoring you, supporting you on decisions? Like, I feel this is a very big area that people don't really talk about.
I don't really have a mentor as such. I think I'd like one, and something I'm working on. Okay. I guess Chris, he's good. Sometimes he just listens. Blah, 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 like, I'm there to listen. But I think when you become the size we are, your leadership team, it's one decision. It's not individual decisions. Mm-hmm. So that really helps. We bounce things off each other. But the manufacturers have got some big leaders with experience within there, and they gain from you and you gain from them. So I've got some really good advice from, guys that are running hundreds of millions of pounds worth of businesses within the FTSE 100s. And they don't get to that level without some kind of knowledge and insight in the market, or even maybe how to approach something. I remember once, there's a guy called Greg sent me a text, and I declined something to do from within his business. And he texted me saying, that was a great move. Like, well done. It's that learning not to say yes to everything as time goes on, because it's not good for you or good for the business in the short term. But I think everyone's still learning from everybody, no matter how big or small the company is, because somebody has a different opinion or a different thought, or they may be up to date on the latest TikTok or something, and you're just not, because you're becoming further and further away from some of these other things because your teams are now getting better at them things from your education.
It brings me back nicely to a question around your team, which I wanted to ask. You built out, you talked about, I think it was only a couple of years ago that you really started to, the business started to really work, and I'm guessing it's because the people that you hired and now you're starting to step out and they're staying in your lane, I think you called it. Specifically around hiring, do you hire someone to develop into the role, or are you hiring someone who has been there, done it, and they are now going to deliver that in your business?
So it's hard to find someone that's been there and done it, because most people now would come from an FMCG or a FTSE 100, and it's hard for them to change. Our UK country manager is a pharmaceutical guy with systems and operations, which is good because everything's gold standard. There's an element of coaching them, and then they bring the big business, multi-billion pound business ways of thinking and structuring and developing the team differently to how, say, for instance, we've done it. But then we're quite big on apprenticeships here as well, giving back. And we have guys join us for 12 months. They go through an apprenticeship process with an external provider. And then at the end of the term, they get a job. And then they learn even more from us. And then we maybe place them within a manufacturer or something for a short space of time. But the good thing is they get the e-com experience, 25 years worth of experience. They get qualifications. We then help them with university, or if they want to go and do a SIPS course or something. And then we get them doing e-commerce the way that we do e-commerce as well, cool. Which is obviously not taught at college or university or anything. And then they get access to such a large talent pool of manufacturers and e-com guys working inside the manufacturing side, and then they share the 1P and the 3P knowledge together. And I think that's why we're just such a good company to work for, because we've got all angles of the business covered. Yeah.
We've learned a lot about you, where you've come from, your journey, the challenges that you faced, and also working with manufacturers. So thank you. One question I would like to really understand and really pick your brain is, people in Amazon right now, or people in e-com, let's put it that way, who are, let's say, for example, they're doing about 2 million in sales right now, generally wholesale model, and they're looking to replicate where you've been, scale up the business, work with manufacturers directly. What advice would you have? How would you position yourself and how would you take that journey?
I think the first thing you need to do is you need to win. You need to have a list of why you're different to every other seller, because it's hard for a manufacturer to differentiate. So it starts with you need facilities. In theory, if you're doing 1-2 million revenue, you have that, unless you're doing some kind of arbitrage or using a prep center. If you're using a prep center, a manufacturer will not work with you, in my opinion. I mean, some manufacturers will, but the multi-billion pound companies won't, because they like to come to your premises, they like to see you, they like to see the stock, they want to ensure that you're following all of their standards and procedures. So that's the first thing to consider. Is it the right thing for you? Is it profitable for you to do that way? Can you scale it? Do you have the team to do that? And then it's as simple as, how do I double my business? So if you're doing 2, how do I do 4? How do I do 4? How can I do 8? How can I do 8? How can I do 16? Then you're an 8-figure seller. It's that simple. You need to get your admin right. Your processes need to be right. Your seller rating needs to be right. All these simple little key things needs to be right. And when a manufacturer does visit you, does it look like you have the room to grow with them? If you don't, then what's the answer for that?
You mentioned it earlier. I think it was not only what you've just said, but also the balance sheet. Do the manufacturers ask to see your P&Ls? Do they want to see that part of the business and see how you're operating?
We share our P&Ls with our manufacturers. They know exactly, if you think about it, the manufacturer knows how much you're making on a SKU level basis, because they supply you. You share your data on what you've sold because they're interested in this kind of thing. So you need to be ready to be transparent, available, and work together. It's not rocket science that if you sell a product for X and take the fees off and everything else, you're left with this much. And the manufacturers want you to be profitable to an element, because without that, you can't grow with them. But then who provides them this data? Who does the accounting? They will open you a credit account, which you'd need to pass as well. So you need to start building on your credit worthiness as well and showing some history.
Is there anything that you don't show the manufacturer? Or is it like, we are transparent, we show everything that they ask for?
Pretty much everything. There's no reason not to. But there's nothing to hide. How can you have a one business mentality and work with a manufacturer as if you are one business without sharing everything? Obviously, they don't know our total overheads and everything else, but they know what we make on, say, their category or their brand or their account, and they understand, obviously, you need to make margin to cover bills. And the manufacturers are always looking for efficiencies. What's your next stage in your business? And that's the same, growing the business from 1, 2 to, say, 10. Is, will I need an element of technology? Will I need conveyor belts? Have I got the correct loading bays? Oh, I need to buy a forklift. Do I have a forklift driver? My basic advice would be, if you're not paying yourself a proper wage, which nobody does initially at the start, is if your business doesn't make enough to pay you a proper wage, then you don't have a business, because you're going to need to employ these people to do these things. So run the company as if it's a £10 million company, is my opinion.
I think that's a really important part. And I used to be, oh no, the profit at the end is my salary. And I learned, I think it was in Profit First, was like, no, you pay yourself a salary, and you have to pay yourself a market rate salary. You can't be too high, too low. It's got to be that if you were to employ someone to do that, you've got to pay the market rate for that, because then you see the true profit of the business.
It's not a lifestyle business. If it's a lifestyle business, fine. But you need to live. But the manufacturers would need to see you being able to live and be sustainable. Otherwise, it's not for them. How do you get more margin in a tough market? So you need support from the manufacturers, or you need to sell more to create more cash margin. No one really cares about return of investment, in my opinion, because it's cash margin that pays the bills and volume. You
took their support from the manufacturers. What is that? What does it look like?
It can be in many ways. It could be from helping from a staffing point of view, a resource point of view. Sometimes they might have a good analyst within their business, so you can share that data. work with them on that. Obviously, competition policy, and there's various laws where your systems can't be linked together and things, but share resource. Maybe they can give us some extra support on SKUs that are maybe not as profitable as we'd like them to be, but they're strategic for them. You just have to work together. You just have to be honest. This product doesn't work for us. We know it's important for you. Can we maybe make more margin on another category and not necessarily this category? This then comes back down to being flexible. I think where people go wrong trying to grow the business from a few million larger is profit. I want to buy as cheap as I can. I want to sell as more as I can. But you have to be strategic, and it's the long-term goal.
Can you give me some example of strategic moves that you've made which people maybe wouldn't think about? Obviously, saving money, trying to drive costs down, yes, but you talked about reducing costs or increasing profit in one strategy to offset something else, which is a strategic decision for the manufacturer. Are there any other ones in the past that you've had where you're like, that was a good move that worked really well for us and the manufacturer?
Yeah, so I've had manufacturers come to us in distress.
Okay.
And we've looked at the deal and it's just not profitable whatsoever, but we did it. Because then we're working with them, we're trading with them, we've done what nobody else could do. Then hopefully you get the good stuff and things go well. And that's always worked for us as well. Because manufacturers will remember that. Manufacturers have numbers to hit. They have excess stock, they have volume stock, something that's not quite as sexy, something that you shouldn't really do. But if you've built up the funds, you can then do these things and be creative and find a different way of either selling that product or bundling it or however you need to do it. The aim should be, if that's a manufacturer you want to work with and you're struggling, find an angle.
Find a win-win.
Find a win.
You talked about your steps of processes, systems, which I'm sure a lot of people listening to now are like, I don't want to do that, but that's a very important part of what we're talking about, building a scalable operation to a very high standard, the manufacturer's liking it. The question I want to ask is, you, the owner, what are the key activities that you focus on? How's that changed from when you started to where you are today?
It's hard. I love the e-com side of things more than anything, but we have teams for that. More mentoring, coaching, I guess the vision, the strategy, looking at new locations, commercial premises, dealing with the global team, which I'm part of. So it's kind of always one decision, but sometimes you have to make a decision that is the right decision or maybe the wrong decision. At the end of the day, if you're the CEO or the boss, sometimes you're going to make decisions that not others like. So you can't always have a joint decision. Your role has to be defined. And what we sit down as a business is, who's going to do what this year? Everyone on the global team have 5 things. One of mine was open the US, hire a new CFO, and 3 or 4 other things that I probably can't discuss. And it's the same with each of these. And then everyone becomes accountable. I think that's the key thing, is your role. Some days I feel that I don't have a role. I can come in, no one even knows I've been in because everyone's in their business, within the business or within their team, doing everything. But then sometimes a silly little thing that someone just doesn't understand, that second nature to me. Sometimes it's a little frustrating because people don't always come to you, especially the managers and the leaders, because they want to deal with it. But sometimes you just ask the question. So that's something we always say is, ask the question, ask for advice. And I think that's another key thing, is advice. Even now, the global team ask me for advice. How would you approach this? How would you do this? Can you just cast your eyes on this? And I think that's where I'm at. Do I like it? It's okay. But I like to get in the thick of it and get dirty and deal with things and look at the marketplaces and tweaks, we call them. How have we done this? Why are we doing this? And just analysing everything the best you can. And predicting Amazon's next move. I think that's the key thing, is what they're going to do next. Is FBA going to be good? Is Merchant Fulfilled going to be good? Are they going to just be a logistics and commission-based model and actually not work with manufacturers as much, which we're seeing and seeing and seeing? We're predicting quite a lot of trends that's happening, which is all in our favour. That's why we're for FBA and Merchant Fulfilled, and so on. And that's another key thing, back onto your previous question, is what have you got to offer the manufacturer? If you don't have large enough premises and balance sheet and everything that goes with it, they're not interested in you just being an FBA-based model. Everybody can do that. So can you do bundling? Can you do seller prime? What time's your collection? How fast are you delivering? What's your average pick time? What's your average ship time? Data is the key thing. If anyone takes anything away from this, trying to build from 7 to 8 figures is data and transparency.
I just have this vision right now of you sitting in a conversation or even approaching a manufacturer with a presentation which is like, these are all the numbers, and it's not like revenue and brands we've helped. It's like, this is my pick time, this is how quick we ship stuff, here's when we get orders out, and it's like, that's the things that they're looking at. They want to know that.
Yeah, what's your growth for capacity?
Yeah.
And then technically, can you store this type of product? Can you ensure that the quality is going to be there? What's your standards? Then you have a quality manager internally and you need to build an org chart of now and where it's going to be. And then it's, what revenue do I need to be able to employ these people? Because how can you approach a manufacturer not having a quality person, not having a warehouse manager? And they'll speak to these guys as well. And you have audits from manufacturers. So you need to think like and put the processes in place a bigger company.
I think it's really interesting you kind of actually moved on to Amazon and what they're doing in the future, because that leads me nicely on to, I'd love to know where you think Amazon and e-commerce are going. You touched upon it there, but how do you see the next 1, 2, 5, 10 years of e-commerce? And I appreciate we're going pretty far out at 10 years, but like, what do you see and how are you seeing that, should we say, evolving into the future?
I think Amazon's going to obviously have more competition. All these new marketplaces back opening, Alibaba and so on. Temu's a big threat. Different kind of products and customer base. I think the Amazon model will be more focused around earning the commissions from the sellers, the logistics, and the last mile delivery. Because it's less complicated for them, less risk. It's an obvious one. And then I think they'll look more to the on-demand type products, your Uber Eats type model. There's lots of companies doing this. Lots of them have failed. A few of them have merged together. But Amazon's in the best place to do this when they're ready. And I think, in my opinion, they're just waiting for the right time, the right element of data, doing a lot of testing all the time. I think everybody sees that. Fulfillment centers are full, then they're not full, and so on. And it's expensive, and at some point they need to start making more profit on that side of the business. So all these vendor managers and account managers that they've got working with the manufacturers, I think it's a good time in this space for sellers on Amazon working with brands, because Amazon are focusing on their own brands. So for me, it's more of how does a manufacturer maintain their brand? Because I think brands are sometimes at threat. Everyone likes particular brands in the market, and your Coca-Colas of the world, they're not going to disappear. But the younger generation that I'm seeing with TikTok and all these other marketplaces, they're not as brand loyal as what we potentially are. And the good thing with Amazon is if you buy from Amazon and there's a problem, they'll deal with it. And their quality is pretty good on their stuff. They're just going to make their products better, and they're in the best place to rank them and so forth. That's my prediction. I believe everything always goes round in a circle as well. We've noticed it now. The high street is kind of dead, but your local Sainsbury's and Tesco's are opening up down, public streets and things, because it's that whole theory of we're 15 minutes maximum from anybody. And I think that's the Amazon method as well. They started with fresh, didn't they? TV adverts, frozen pizza, chilled beer, in the summer delivery within an hour, which is pretty good. And I think people now are a bit more relaxed on, doesn't have to be next day, it doesn't have to be within 15 minutes unless it's an emergency or something like some of the guys can deliver in. So I think the whole Prime thing will be a little bit more relaxed. It's a good price, you're definitely going to get it. Your subscribe and saves and so forth, I think, will be a big focus. But I think that's what they will focus on more, is how do we reach the customer the fastest way possible, the best way possible, deliver them a good experience. And whether that's big sellers have a new title, so they're maybe like prestigious in a way where hopefully and ideally a seller like us is recognised within Amazon as a good guy, and we're kind of taking all of that away from them that they was doing, because we're working with the manufacturer and helping the manufacturer, then rather than the manufacturer working with Amazon and with us. Do I see that in the short term where they would stop working with a manufacturer? No, because they still want an element of control, but there's some price points and products that just doesn't work for Amazon any longer. We see that when they've disabled the minimum order quantity. There'll be a reason for that. And in my opinion, that's because you can no longer buy this bottle of water, 1 unit, because Amazon just can't deliver it. And you can't then list it as a minimum order quantity, 6 units. But you can still buy it as a single unit if you buy it through, say, Amazon Fresh with the rest of your shopping. Then opens that even more, is effectively becoming a Walmart or an Asda or a Tesco's. That's what I would do if I was Amazon. Amazon's interested. Want any advice?
I love it.
But I think that's the future of e-commerce, is this fast commerce, as they call it. I think it's quite big in India. Stuff's being delivered in 5-10 minutes. Obviously, we don't have the market here in the UK, and each market's different. It just seems like natural progression. Being a logistics warehouse and facility with less people, automation, automated vehicles potentially. Not quite sure whether the drone thing will take off. But I just think it's common sense, right? That's the way.
Yeah, you've seen it from 5 to 7 day delivery. When Amazon launched next day, or a US 2-day, that was like incredible.
Yeah.
And then I remember same day delivery, and that was like, I think probably 10 years ago, I remember that. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. Yeah. I could literally get it within a few hours. That was incredible. So
as a business, we run a 24/7 operation, so that we're often picking and packing faster than what Amazon's doing. And if you've got good sellers doing that, and I think that was the key thing to Amazon, was how do we have bigger, better sellers in large quantities? And can they cover this gap? If they can, then obviously Amazon will keep controlling. Because I think Amazon's theory was, we need to have all the brands on our website because we need to be the destination point, and we need to be the lowest price because to keep people coming back and back and back. And I think that's one of the probably reasons it'll take longer, is that Amazon will still want to work with the big boys because then they can control things. But then you have competitive pricing now, which is a frustration for a lot of the smaller sellers when they're contacting me. So if competitive pricing's always there, then in theory Amazon's always competitively priced. So then there's less need for them to work with the manufacturers because pricing's controlled on the market.
So it's going to be an interesting space, and I definitely see the increase in other marketplace competitors.
Yeah.
And that's a very interesting, and also because of the dominance of Amazon, they get a lot of attention from governments, regulators, and that causes another kind of layer to the equation. We could talk about marketplaces and what's going to happen, but obviously only the future will tell.
Yeah.
What about you? Where are you going? What about the business here?
We want to grow, be the best in class. We're now looking heavily into automation, more efficiencies, speed and agility, and looking at new ideas, different offerings, looking at the data closer. Why is a customer buying this? Or, actually, they're buying this as well with this. What's the frequency of that? I think efficiencies, scale, automation, and they all kind of work together.
And I think that comes back to I think you talked about the 5 key points of your business. You talked about transparency, driving costs down, working together with the manufacturers. And all of that is about you're just doing more of the same, but getting better and better and better.
Yeah, we're learning every day. We're not the best. No one's the best, because if you are the best, then how can you improve and grow further? Don't be complacent. Just crack on and just enjoy it. Everyone's on the journey. Have some fun. One of our key things is have to have fun, right? If you don't have fun, then it's just a normal job like it is for everybody else.
How do you have fun?
Doing this. This is my fun. This is my fun.
I think it's true. Many business owners love the game.
Yeah, I think it frustrates people within the business because, so then if I'm dialed in on a weekend or something, but this is us. This is what we do. And I think everyone's on the same culture, right? It's don't do what I do, but do what I do is what I say. But don't want people to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because then you don't have that balance. But I think I've got a good balance. Enjoy time with my children and doing their activities and being able to have the freedom to then still log in and check things. And that's the good thing with the business that we're building. It's more of a tech business. You can access the business anywhere if your systems and solutions are right.
Now, I would normally ask you how people can get in contact, but I'm sure that's not actually something that you want, because obviously you get inundated with thousands and thousands of messages. So I would just like to say, for myself and everyone watching, thank you so much for everything you've shared. Thank you for sharing the journey with me, and obviously meeting and sharing today with everyone. My mind has been blown since meeting you about where you can go with this business, but not only that, the different avenues, and especially where manufacturers buying into your company, which is incredible. Didn't even know that was an option. And I also just say thank you very much for how you view the relationship with manufacturers and why you look at that way. And we can take a lot away from that about how we should structure our businesses to excel into the coming years and working with brands directly and having a win-win relationship.
Cool. No problem.
Thank
Appreciate you coming to see us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Thomas.
Okay, so if you're struggling to find the profitable products, or maybe even the products you are buying are tanking, what do you need? You need to find those profitable suppliers which are working for Amazon sellers. This is why I've put together my top 100 supplier list for the USA and for the UK. And if you look in the description right now, you're going to see a link to that where you can access it for free. Have a look down below.